Let's get started in upgrading your existing PayPal integration with our Pay Later button and Pay Later messaging. This video guide will assume that you already have our PayPal button integrated, where you would already have our JavaScript SDK for the front end and our Orders v2 API calls on the back end. In order to add the additional Pay Later button and the messaging, you will find that the groundwork is already laid and must simply update a few options in your code. Let's first take a look at adding the Pay Later button. Here, I will flip over to front-end HTML and JavaScript code. So navigate to the portion of your codebase where the PayPal button is configured as well as gets rendered. So I'll just quickly search for the word render and it will place me in the area in my code. Here it is. This small chunk of code represents all of my existing PayPal button. For the purposes of this demonstration, this and all code that you see on screen was designed to be simplified in order to follow the guidance easier and cut down on the noise, as well as to enable the sole focus of the guidance to remain on the integration upgrade part. Now, we simply need to create another button and tweak some settings. So you can do the following actions in your preferred JavaScript methodology, but for the sake of explanation, I'm going to take all of this and copy it right below down here, and I'll just quickly rename the variable so that it isn't used twice, and then down here as well. Okay, so now this new block of code will do the exact same thing as the original up top, which it still will render another button on the page. And I've done it quick and easy by copying and pasting. Of course, in your code base, you will be able to do this much more elegantly. And there's a wide variety of ways to do this, as every system or every partner has their own code architecture baked in already. So let's examine in the configuration options. When you call the .button function, right before you render it, you should see an option called funding source, and it should have a value that ends in PayPal. And that's what makes the existing button display only the PayPal button. So since we're working on our second button code here, let's change this last key to say Pay Later instead, so that it can point to our Pay Later value. You still can have all the same settings for this Pay Later button and the same functions as the PayPal button. As you can see here, I'm even rendering the button in the same div element down here, just as the first original one is rendered up here, which you can change this if you need to. You can render it in any other element if needed, but for this demonstration, I'll leave it just the same. Now I've saved this, and without making any other changes, let's just quickly take a look at what has happened on the website. So I'm going to switch back to this cart view that I had earlier and refresh the page with our updates. And there you go. The new Pay Later button has now rendered directly below the first button. And so remember, this is its own button, so you can modify the config object differently than the PayPal one. I'll just do a simple change here and add color, and let's make it gold, match it with the first button. As an example, I'm going to save it, go back, refresh, and perfect. There we go. Now it's gold. So you can still make some changes to this one as you prefer without necessarily affecting the first one. Now, if I just quickly click on this regular PayPal button, it will load just the same. And I happen to already have logged in earlier, so it should log me in automatically, and it will allow me to continue with my payment. With the new Pay Later button, though, this will take users directly to the Pay Later installment options right on the PayPal page that they land on. We have the Pay in 4 here, as you can see. We also have the Pay Monthly. Let's go back to the Pay in 4. This is in sandbox mode, so let's do a quick mock-up of the process. Clicking continue, accepting the terms, clicking on the agree and pay, and there we are, you're approved. And lastly, the users will click on pay and then usually be taken to the final successful order page. And even during the rendering of this Pay Later button, it will only show up if the buyer is in an eligible location or if the amount itself is within the eligible range. Since I was pre-logged in, it knows already and will only show up for a buyer's personal account, not a business account. And of course, the buyer would need to pass our credit and risk checks. Lastly, the merchant will also need to be eligible from a technical perspective. Namely, it's necessary for the merchants to have not integrated billing agreements or vaulting at any time in the past with that regular PayPal button integration that they already had. This button will only show up if no vaulting or billing agreements have been used in the past with this same PayPal account. Now, I know I just mentioned a lot of processes there, but rest assured that behind the scenes, PayPal is the one who handles the eligibility checks, if the range qualifies on amount-based product selection, the geographic restrictions, the credit decisioning. The only thing that you as a partner handle is adding the correct parameters in the SDK, which I'm going to show in a few seconds here. Also rendering the new button, just as I have already shown, as well as rendering the Pay Later messaging, which I will demonstrate shortly, and capturing the orders in a timely manner. So let's take a look at adding the Pay Later messaging, and we will strive to add it near this area in the cart page. So let's go back to the code and do that now. Let me navigate to where the SDK script tag is being loaded. So I'll search SDK. Here it is. Now we already have the components query parameter here, which has the button as our value, or you may have more values as well, but we're going to add the messaging value by separating it with a comma here and just typing messages. And that will tell the SDK to load the messages component in the SDK as well. It's recommended to add the messaging in the product pages, the cart page, and the checkout page. We do have different variations of the messaging as well, where you can add it to the home page or any other page where you want to educate customers on our pay later offers. For now, let's add it and show it in the cart page, since that's the example that I have loaded for this video guide. And I'm going to just quickly search in my code here for the elements in that area. So I'll navigate to the summary total. Yep, the order summary here. You can place it near the order totals while the user is looking at the totals, or near the relevant action buttons such as add to cart or proceed to checkout, and so on. I'm going to place messaging down here right below the summary total, and you can do this by simply adding an HTML element of a div with some custom data attributes that I will show. First, I'll identify it here so I can select it later on, pp_message. And the first data attribute I'll add is data-pp-amount. And then I'll add a data-pp-message, and this one will tell our SDK that this whole div is a messaging div. And for now, we'll just add one more called data-pp-placement, and I'll give it the value of cart, since I know that this is going on my cart page. Okay, so that's it. It's this whole div where our messaging will be rendered, and in the description of this video, you will find all the links to our dev docs that will tell you all of our custom attribute names, as well as their possible values, so that you can further customize your messaging to fit your needs. Lastly, the reason why I added an ID to this is just to show you that you should add the current total amount if you're on a page that displays the total or has the total available. As you can see here, I've grabbed that element, and in my function called setPPAmount, in your case, it will be whichever location you obtain the total amount on that page. You would then also pass the same total in the messaging div custom attribute of data-pp-amount anytime it gets updated. And our SDK will listen to the changes on the value of that attribute and update the messaging to display the correct amount that the users could potentially split into installment payments. If the amount doesn't fall into any of our required ranges, then it will also fall back into messaging that doesn't include an amount, but is still compliant. You also have the option to render the messaging using JavaScript only instead of the HTML like how I just did. And the links on how to do that will also be included in the video description. Okay, so that's it for the messaging. Let's navigate to the website now, and I placed it somewhere around here. So let's refresh the page to see our latest update. And there it is. Of course, you can always move it to wherever you need to. Here you will see the payment amount split up. We obtained it from this amount here. Now, if merchants create authorizations to capture at a later time, customers will not be charged if the authorization isn't captured by the merchant before it expires. And for the merchants, it's recommended to capture orders immediately for digital goods or services and about 24 hours for physical goods. Now, back on my example website, you will notice that it updates the quantity after I click on update, and I made it so that it doesn't refresh the page at all. And once the total gets updated, the messaging div will auto update as well, so long as I pass the new total in the custom attribute that I just showed. So I can update it again, and here it goes. We can also click on the messaging, and this is where the customer can see more in depth what the Pay Later button will offer them, and they can click out of it as well. So that's it. We have now successfully upgraded your existing PayPal button integration to add the Pay Later button as well as the Pay Later messaging.